got a mail saying that you were jailed.
We'd like to reconvene the Planning Commission meeting of October 22nd. Just so we can set everybody's expectations, Ted has a prior commitment, so we will be adjourning at 4 o'clock.
Or sooner.
At 4 o'clock, I'll be gone.
Yes. Okay, well, so we'll plan accordingly.
I would like to have a few minutes at the end just to sort of update you on a few other things that have been going on, so.
So maybe we
If
should really try and wrap it up to where we're at 3:30, to wherever we're at.
3:45, whatever.
3:30, well, then we can public comment, you know,
Okay.
and all of that.
3:30.
So let's target for 3:30 and then see where we're at. Okay, great. All righty, well, we're moving on to one of my favorite subjects, economic development. And,
right along.
yeah, moving right along. So I did provide some written comments, and I think that you guys, there was copies of it there. And, you know, for consideration. One of the problems I had with the goal is that, you know, it mentions specifically retail, which retail really isn't an economic generator unless it's brings in money from outside of the county, and those are usually only like Costco's and those kinds of, but like little grocery stores and stuff, they're not, I mean, they generate jobs, but they're not really like economic engines. So I thought, just as a goal, is to really broaden it to sort of the typical definition of economic development, which is, I see I have a typo here, but is to strengthen and diversify the economic base through the creation, retention, expansion, and attraction of business and industry, as a suggestion.
I don't have a problem with your revision here. I don't know that it, but I disagree that the small business is not an economic.
I didn't say small business, I said retail.
Look, see,
I
you
didn't
know,
say small.
That's how important it is for one person to correctly quote the next,
Okay.
okay? So what was your words again?
It says here retail uses. I didn't say anything about small business.
Where are you reading retail?
Yeah, it's the original goal.
The original goal says a broad range of employment and retail
Oh,
uses.
retail use,
Right, and also it's sort of redundant because employment is a retail use. And
okay. And you're saying that retail uses are or are not what, in your mind?
small retail is only an economic generator if it brings in money from outside of the county, and typically that is, I mean, as far as an economic development,
Okay, that was the point that I disagreed with, because if a retail establishment here prevents somebody from going outside the county to get what they need, then that's dollars we make that we wouldn't have otherwise made.
absolutely.
Right.
But I'm just saying, as a goal, would you want to have as a goal that we're going to attract retail that doesn't generate investment?
I agree with the concept that it doesn't fit with a goal statement, because a goal statement should be broader than this.
Yes, that's my point.
Right.
Okay.
But not for the reasons you mentioned, that it's not an economic generator, but that it just doesn't belong as a broad brushstroke goal. The problem that I have with LU4 is this concept of improving a balance between jobs and housing, which later comes up as policy statements do jobs and housing analyses. It comes up more than once downstream of this. So I'm not sure what a jobs housing analysis is or what it's intended to do. But so maybe if I had an explanation of that, I could understand better why someone thinks it belongs in the general
So
plan.
jobs housing balance is sort of a general term to look at the numbers of jobs versus the number of homes in a community. And the reason why that's important is that if we are just a bedroom community for another jurisdiction, then we're paying for all the services and all the shopping and all the economic generation that's created by jobs are being done elsewhere.
Okay.
And so the concept, and there's no firm number, is it, 3.2 to 1 or something like that. It's just, the general concept of, as we're providing housing, let's make sure that we also look at means to develop businesses, whether they're retail businesses, whether they're service industries, whatever they might be, that people don't have to drive to Modesto or to Jackson or to Sonora for a job, that they can work in the community in which they live. There's a number of reasons for that. Reduces trips, it encourages, people shop, spend their money here in town, or whatever town it is that they're in, and that generates more jobs and more income and sales tax revenue and all the other benefits that a county can get by having jobs, businesses within the county.
2 points. One is that it's likely, I think if it hasn't already been established, that the county is becoming or has become a retirement community in large part, okay? So retirees that, well, they lived elsewhere, they cash out their home and they downsize and they come to Calaveras County, they don't need a job. They're not in the job market. So they're not impacting our county in that way. And they're not impacting the schools either. They pay taxes and whatnot to support the schools, but they don't impact the schools. So that's, it's like found money in a sense. It's free money. Their incomes are spent, at least in part, in the county. Their taxes are spent in the county more, I believe, in general, than their impact on the community, on infrastructure, on schools, etc. So I don't know how the statement of jobs housing analysis, how do you factor that component into it? Secondly, I'm all in favor of goals and policies that say what Fawn just said, strengthen and diverse the economic base through, creating retention, expansion of attracting businesses. I'm all in favor of doing that. That's absolutely what we should be doing. But I don't think it needs to be, I don't think we need to tie it to an analysis of how many homes versus jobs we have. That'll work itself out. If we've got jobs here that we don't have now, we grow our economic base with, let's say retail, industrial, whatever we do, the demand on housing and the growth of housing will follow. And it will also follow that if there are a number of residents here that have to go elsewhere, and there already are, we know that, that have to go elsewhere for shopping, that people who build retail will say, hey, there's a demand in Calaveras County that's not being met. Those people are having to drive 80-mile round trips to do their shopping. That's a pretty good place to put something, a store that doesn't exist now. Those economic market forces will take place. So my point is I don't think the county needs to do an analysis, and even if we did an analysis, what difference would it make? You still got to have people that are willing to say, look at these numbers, look at this unmet need, would you like to help meet that need? There's money in it for you, there's a profit in it for you.
So,
But and elsewhere, just to wrap it up, elsewhere, the jobs housing analysis is used as a restriction for developments of a certain size or greater. I think it's 100.
So you're looking at specifically policy 4.6, LU 4.6, next page.
Yes. See, there you are. So in order to do a project of 100 or more units, I as a developer have to do this jobs housing balance analysis. I don't think it's any of my business. I mean, if I offer a house for sale and somebody buys it, it's either because they've got a job or don't need one, or they're taking a chance that they're going to get one at some point in the future. In any case, if they're buying a house, they probably have a job or don't need one, otherwise they wouldn't qualify for buying the house.
As I understand it, Fawn's work that she's passed out here would take the place of the current economics and land use section that was provided to us earlier. Is that correct?
Yes, but, you know, they're all suggest, it doesn't have to be like, you know, all for, you know, comprehensive. It's food for thought, yes.
Okay, well, I much prefer what Fawn has provided to what was in the existing draft. I have
too.
just a couple of suggestions down the road. I can give them to you now if you want.
Okay,
On the goal, which reads to strengthen and
it should be diversify.
our economic base through the creation, retention, expansion, and attraction of business and industry. I would have it read attraction of business, comma, agriculture and industry.
Sure.
Okay.
It's
And
not indicating that agriculture is not a business, is it? I mean,
Well, I would have thought it would be inclusive, but
well, it's specifically mentioned down in 4.4.
I don't have any problem, I mean, it's a big part of our economy, so I don't have any problem adding it as a separate citation.
My only other question is in 4.9, I'm not convinced that encouraging the development of a higher educated skilled workforce, et cetera, is actually a land use issue. I don't know what we would do.
Well, it's only
do
from
that.
the economic development standpoint that increasingly in the future, currently today, but increasingly in the future, if a community doesn't have a skilled workforce, it's going to be really hard to attract any kind of business to that community. That's the relationship.
I agree with that. I'm not sure that it belongs in the general plan, which is.
Yeah, and
something we-
you know, I included it because it had a policy in here that was already directing itself to workforce.
I know, and I questioned that. too.
Yeah, sure.
I would say that there is a connection, and maybe this goes back to what we talked about earlier today as far as when school district comes in and they want to, or say Delta College decides they want to locate a satellite campus here, that would be something that we would encourage as a component of our general plan, because that would help then train local population for skilled positions that would come. I do know of someone, I think I mentioned this before, who is trying to relocate his business here. He does not have the skilled workforce. He's actually working with Delta College and Columbia College to try to provide some specific job training for his specific need to provide a fairly significant number of skilled, well-paying jobs that he can't fill here. He's ready to move here, but can't do it because there's not enough people that have the skills that he needs.
And if anybody's really interested in reading some interesting, a book, it's called When the Boomers Bail by Mark Lotman. And in it, he provides some very insightful information about the relationship between talent and skilled workforce and the economic survivability, basically, of communities.
I don't question any of that.
Yeah.
I just wonder if this is the place to put it, that's
Yes.
all.
And I think Peter's point is a good one because it does provide, there is a direct relationship between our ability to grow our economy and the skilled workforce that we have and the talent base that we have to supply those industries. We're not saying we're going to provide them. What are we saying? We're encouraging. And I think we should be encouraging.
I can think of a good example of how that plays in, and that would be the COE project. Is everybody familiar with the COE project?
Yes.
The educational components of it. That speaks to 4.9, your 4.9. Well, both of them. No, for your 4.9, that would be directly related to such an endeavor. I'm just trying to correlate because your version doesn't sort of mark up so I can see what has been changed, what has been cut, and what has been, you know what I mean?
No, but what I did basically is on the existing draft, 4.1, I feel really is, I don't know why we're singling out communications infrastructure here. I think it should be in public facilities. It's important, yes, but so is sewer and water and all of the other. So I did not include that in my draft. And maybe Peter has a good reason why it should be here, but,
It was there when I started.
okay. Yeah, I mean, I don't know why we're singling it out. It's
I'm-
critical, but,
I'm good with what you have written here. I like it much better than what exists in the current policy. I think it's pretty clear and concise about what you're trying to say. So I don't have any other opinion on that. And
well, and I can just summarize a couple of other things that there were, like, land use 4.2 and 4.3, I thought were redundant. You know, home-based occupations and live work are, you know, kind of the same thing.
Yes, and yours is now 4.3.
Yes.
Let's see, isn't there an ordinance that speaks to home-based businesses that's countywide, not just quote-unquote suitable neighborhoods? Peter?
I don't know.
Um,
I think it would be just whatever's allowed in each land use designation currently, would it?
Well, I think all of our residential zones allow essentially home occupations. And then there's sort of a range of different types that are, you know, through the ordinance. And again, that gets into the details of how we would allow
Right.
that. And as we go through a zoning ordinance update, then we would look at the home occupation provisions of the code and say, well, how does this fit in with our goal of promoting economic development and the specific policy of allowing these kinds of uses? And there may be some standards we want to put in place to protect the residential character of the neighborhood, so that's where the details, we don't need to put that into the general plan, but we, you know, and that's where I think the language of suitable neighborhoods will, you know, how does that, and maybe suitable neighborhoods isn't the right phrase, maybe it's you know, compatible with the neighborhood or something along those lines.
Yeah, because there's a whole range of, I mean, it really depends on if you've got, you know, if you've got trucks that you're parking on the street, if you've got employees that are, you know, using up your roads, or if you're just like one consultant working out of your house. You know, there's a range of impacts.
Right. A guy with a semi-truck and trailer, more of an impact than...
Yes.
You don't even know the business is there. I understand that. I'm just wondering if we have, if this creates any compatibility issues with existing ordinances where businesses are allowed, and now if those ordinances need to be revisited because suitable neighborhoods is now a debatable issue, and maybe
Maybe calling
someone
it,
comes forward and says, my neighbor is running such and such a business, the guy's been doing it for 10 years, and now the general plan says suitable neighborhoods, I don't think his business is suitable for our neighborhood, and so you get a fight over something that you otherwise wouldn't have a fight over. That's what, my only issue is that.
So I would recommend changing "insuitable" to "compatible with."
yeah, because suitable sounds like it's got
This neighborhood's okay and this
defined,
one's not,
yes,
yeah.
Right, so just compatible with the neighborhood.
Okay. The other thing that I would like to see, the existing 4.1 retained, there's been a lot of talk about, and Ms. Crane, if she's here, she's one of the ones that's talked about it quite a bit. Wi-Fi, you know, with the benefits to the county of an improved Wi-Fi system. I can see that. And if the county is in a position to, what's the word, facilitate? Yes, facilitate improvement of that network, or cell phone networks and whatever to improve communication, I think that is an economic benefit to the county and would belong in this element.
But I think Vaughn has listed that under 4.2. Maybe we can add a few words of clarification there, but I think was it your intention to?
Yeah, I mean, why are we singling it out? I mean, Wi-Fi is important, so is fiber, so is any sort of broadband network.
There's no need to mention Wi-Fi, it just mentions communication, infrastructure.
She's got it under 4.2.
Right, so my question is, why do we need a separate, singular policy for state-of-the-art communications infrastructure?
Well, let me compare the thrust of...
I think this policy should go in public facilities. I'm not saying get rid of it, I just say, I think we should say that we should provide the infrastructure needed by business. That would include power, that includes communication, that includes, you know, public services. But why have a separate one? I mean, we might as well have a separate one for the, you know, state-of-the-art power or state-of-the-art AT&T or phone communications. I'm just saying, why is this communications infrastructure get its own policy? Here, in this land use element, I think it should be in public facilities. That policy should be there.
Hang on a second.
Wouldn't
Kelly?
that be true with 4.2 in your draft?
A 4.2? No, because I think all of those infrastructure, all of those should be mentioned. I think they're all important. Communications does include state-of-the-art communications in terms of broadband. I think it is important for, if you want to encourage development, I mean, certainly shovel-ready property is the key, and that has all of the services up, on-site or at the curbside, but,
Here's how 4.2 doesn't accomplish what 4.1 attempts to accomplish. Work with infrastructure.
oh, I'm sorry, which 4.1 are you talking about? I'm
The
looking
old-
at
Your 4.1.
the old 4.1, okay, okay.
Okay,
And
now
you're
you're saying
4.2.
Yeah.
it's not needed,
All
it's
right.
because it's duplicated in 4.2, or it's otherwise doesn't deserve its own mention. Your 4.2 says work with infrastructure providers, that is power, communications, water, and wastewater, to serve commercial, industrial, and mixed-use parcels. Well, I don't know what work with them means, but a communications infrastructure such as can be inferred by the old 4.1 would have nothing to do with commercial, industrial, and mixed-use parcels.
That it's much broader, is what you're saying.
Yes,
Sure, and that's why it belongs in public facilities.
well,
I'm fine,
But-
you know what?
but
I'm
it does
good.
need-
I'm fine leaving it like this. Let's put it back in. It's just a little more specific. It's good.
Can you just add old 4.1 to new 4.2, just a separate sentence?
That's what I was.
Sure. Yeah, there you go.
So
I'm just going to add it.
We're
again.
adding 4.1 to the end of, the old 4.1 to the end of the new 4.2?
Correct.
Yes. So just for emphasis.
old,
Facilitate the provision of state-of-the-art communications infrastructure.
yeah,
Right. Would go at the end of, after work with infrastructure providers, blah, 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 to serve commercial/industrial/mixed-use parcels, and then maybe, and facilitate the provision of state-of-the-art communications infrastructure.
okay, would you say that you converted old 4.4-10, I think it should be 4.10, it's
it
typo,
was, yes.
to your 4.7, was that your
Yes.
intent to
Yes.
roll that in?
Yes, and let's spin it around and come from a positive angle rather than a negative one.
Well, I think that's a good goal. I think what 4.10 would do, and without looking ahead, is point to a specific implementation measure. Peter, can you point me in that direction? Was there a implementation measure that said something to the effect of, look at your regulations and look at your structure and whatnot to see if it's cumbersome?
I think the closest thing here was, and I might be wrong, was this new and emerging markets one, because there's only two implementation. One is adopted telecommunications
Oh,
facilities.
can you point me to the page that you're on?
Very last page. LU-4B.
Oh, 4B.
Yeah, I think, is that what that relates to?
Well, I had LU4G was specific to implement LU4.10.
And I suggested when we get to it that instead of professional relationships, that would be renamed business-friendly.
I don't see your 4.7 as No, I'm sorry, the old 4.10 as relating to LU 4B. But I thought I had seen,
No, he said, Peter's saying it's related to 4G.
4G.
4G, not 4B.
it's on the, it's tangential to it, yes, but I thought the thrust of 4.10 was directing the county to look at our processes within planning, building, and probably public works to determine whether or not they were unnecessarily hindering
Right.
they were creating unnecessary barriers, unnecessary
Right, so,
complications.
so what there is existing in the 410, there is really no implementation measure that does that, right? Currently.
Well, I thought there was, is my point.
Right.
And if it's, so that now if it's gone from the new version, then what happens to the implementation measure, which I thought was valuable?
Well, and what I'm suggesting is that, if 4G was the intent of the implementation measure for the policy for 4-10, then, I mean, the title's wrong, professional relationships. I mean, to me, it should be business friendly. And then I have a note here that we need to add something in here that assessing building and planning review and permit process, whether annually or, every 3 years,
Yeah,
something.
probably annually is too much, but,
Yeah, but something in here that gets to actually assessing how, streamlining the process and looking for barriers.
Well, the second sentence there says, amend the general plan and applicable ordinances where such needs or constraints are identified. So the idea would be that we would work with business groups, community groups to find out where those constraints are. And then, 'cause, I couldn't
Okay,
really
so-
do it in a vacuum.
so we're talking about, in adopting 4.7, we would want to adopt a implementation measure that addresses that more spot on. Would you agree?
Right. How would we go about removing those constraints? Identifying them and then removing them?
Yeah,
And that's the point of 4G. If that didn't get to it, then we should tweak it.
yeah, I think 4G in that sense doesn't cover the ground.
Okay.
So I think if you just want to add to 4G, it would be language to the effect of reviewing procedures. Maybe procedures is a pretty good word for it. Procedures and fees, for example, within the planning, building, and public works departments.
But we don't even need to specify which departments, whatever
Well,
ones.
within the government, within the county government,
Yeah, it would apply to us, so.
To determine to the extent to which they unnecessarily hinder, they are unnecessarily inefficient, they hinder productivity, whatever. I'm not giving you too much specific guideline, but you get the picture?
Yeah.
Okay. And that way, FONS 4.7 covers the old 4.10, in my opinion.
Any other comments at this point?
On number 4.6, by encouraging a mixed-use concentration, be a little more specific what you mean by mixed use. I mean, I see entertainment, arts, housing, services to create a strong sense of place.
Well, there's, with this new general plan there, we talked about there's 3 kind of mixed-use general plan land use designations. we collapsed them into two, I believe, which will, like, for example, in McCollum Hill, as it's proposed, right now, McCollum Hill is a patchwork of primarily single-family, residential with, like, commercial, and it's got, split zoning on some parcels, like the one I have. And so this policy is really getting at supporting that land use designation that would include sort of the core of all of downtown McCollum Hill will now be this historic, community historic land use designation. So it's encouraging that mix of use of residential and commercial in areas designated for that particular type of use.
I didn't catch that. In Moke Hill, as an example.
Yes.
You've got what?
We've got a mix of, we've got land uses that aren't really supported by our current general plan. So we've got commercial
in
uses and
Arnold, too,
residential,
same-
we've got
same
residential,
thing.
commercial, and it's very problematic for people because with insurance, for example, the front of my building is commercial. Before it was used as commercial, it was hard to find an insurer because I've got part of my property for commercial and part of it residential. What this policy is just really supporting that type of uses should be encouraged and should be allowed and should be supported by the community historic land use designation. So it's just saying, the policy is saying, we think this is a good idea. We're going to encourage this kind of mixed use.
Okay, elsewhere in the, I think it's the housing element, talks about the same subject in the sense of the concept of residential, commercial combination type of structure. And that's what you're talking about, is it not?
Yes.
Okay, so,
Well, and also.
I think it's also just the interplay, the mix of,
Right.
instead of having, okay, this area's commercial, this area's residential.
So it's not like combined necessarily, but it's like okay to have a residential house here, and then you've got a little business here, and then over here you've got another little house and
Well,
a
and
little
we've got
business.
commercial buildings, lower levels commercial, upper levels residential in Arnold. And I
Right.
think they have it in Copper too.
But it's not your sort of suburban model where you've got, here's your.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay,
right.
And there's plenty of areas for that.
Why can't you do that now, just because you've got this sort of patchwork zoning issue in Moke Hill, for example? Can't you just do that now without?
No, and
The
you'd have to
current
get
general
a,
plan doesn't really allow it.
no, you'd have to get a general plan amendment, you'd have to go get a.
Are you saying a particular parcel?
Yes.
That's residential, can't be built residential because it,
No, let's say a parcel is currently residential on Main Street. Someone comes in, they buy and they like, instead of a house, they want to put a little business, a little boutique. They can't do that, they have to go get a general plan amendment, they have to get a zoning change. This structure says, in areas that are appropriate for this kind of use, we want to encourage it. We think it's a great idea. That's all I'm saying here.
okay, but how does this solve that problem? Would it not, wouldn't the person still need to get a map amendment to convert a residential parcel to a commercial one? In the
Let's-
example you gave.
Not if we designate those areas that are appropriate for that as a mixed use,
Oh, you're talking about creating a new category.
which we
There
have
is
on
a
the
new
draft now.
category.
There are the two new categories, community center, historic, and communities.
Okay, where would you decide to go about converting those parcels, which parcels to a mixed-use category?
That's part
really-
of the land use mapping exercise.
Right. Now, the other thing this would do is, let's say that within this sort of downtown McCollum Hill, there's this, pink zone that it's like now it's hopefully will be designated community center historic, which would allow that kind of mixed use. Let's say on the other side of China Gulch, there's there's a house, or there's another little, like a little enclave of houses that like, wow, we like what you're doing over there. We wish we had that. Then they would have to get a general plan amendment, but this policy would say, we think that's a good idea, and that is compatible with the general plan. So that's
Okay.
where that comes into
Would
play.
this cover a person who they like this little house, it's a cute little house, and it's in this area, and they say, you know what, that cute little house would make a really nice hairdressing parlor, because it's it's attractive for that use. They could just go ahead and, instead of living there, they can convert it to a hairdressing parlor. They don't have to,
Only if the land use supported it, but
well,
if
if
they...
it was mixed use.
Yes, if it was mixed use, they could do that. Yeah.
Okay.
How?
And as we adopt zoning standards that implement that.
Right.
Well,
Where's that falling at under this? I'm sorry, I'm holding up the graph, the chart. of these zones.
I don't think is it in here?
Should be in there.
And then my question is on mixed use. By adopting this and handling it this way, how would that affect spot zoning requests?
In a way, it says, in these areas, spot zoning's okay. But what we actually would rather do is adopt a mixed-use zone that says, here are the types of uses, the types of commercial and residential uses that are compatible with each other.
And would that adopt commercial professional? I guess that's the specific thing I'm looking for.
So the,
Because we've just done a whole bunch of denials based on spot zoning and commercial professional use, and now we're talking about adopting mixed use, so I want some clarity on that.
I think the answer is that the spot zoning issue in these areas would disappear.
right. It shouldn't be an issue. I think that the medical marijuana dispensary issue and the way that we chose to regulate it and limit it by limiting it to that specific zone has created a problem that we didn't foresee when we adopted that requirement. We will certainly be readdressing medical marijuana based on the new state laws that just have come out. I want to talk a little bit about that at the end of the meeting, just to give you guys a heads up what's happening. The chart, table LU2 that you held up, page 14 of the draft, shows that in the community centers, there's a variety of zoning that's permitted, both commercial and residential. What this doesn't show is what future zones might be created when we update the zoning ordinance, be consistent with the general plan. I suspect, I would recommend that we adopt a mixed-use zone that would allow both residential and commercial in it, so that we take the next step. You don't have, not only do you not need to do a general plan amendment to convert a residence to a business or vice versa, but we also have a zoning ordinance or zoning designation in place that also says these sites are okay for whatever sort of central business use that is appropriate, that, you know, based on the community design, a mix of housing and businesses are good here. We'll have areas where it's not. You know, a more central core commercial area, we may not want to have residences in there. And we may have residential areas where it's just inappropriate to have commercial. And that's where we differentiate between strictly commercial, strictly residential, and the mixed-use designation.
Wouldn't you have to have a land use designation entitled mixed use or something like that?
That's what we do.
That's what it
That's the
does.
community center designation is a mixed-use designation.
Which means you got to go back to the other
And it
LU1.
may be that the community center is very broad, and it allows residential or commercial or both. And it's going to be refined by the zoning. So in Fawn's example of McCollum Hill, we'll have areas of the community center that's really appropriate for commercial. Maybe it's right on the highway. You don't want to put houses right on the highway because of the noise issue. So that's going to be zoned commercial. But then as you get into the historic part, which is a mix of usage, you've got a house next to an old business and, you know, it's a hodgepodge of stuff. It's great, it works. It's been working for 200 years or 150 years. Keep it that way, expand it, let it evolve the way it's continued to evolve. And then you go into another area that's primarily residential. And it may be inappropriate to put a business right in the middle of that because it's just the nature. There's no parking, the access is bad. And so we'll have to refine the zoning, you know, as we get into the details of the zoning map to be compatible with the general plan map. We'll have to look at those areas more closely to say, okay, now we're refining it. We've got a broader range of mix of uses within this community. Within that now, here are the areas, this is appropriate for mix, So we don't get into trying to zone every parcel with the general plan, but we provide that broader scale of land use designation. We'll have a lot of work ahead of us still.
Yeah.
On 4.6, it has this phrase, "to create a strong, quote, sense of place," end quote. I'm not sure what that is. Do we need it? Can we just say, "revitalize existing community centers by encouraging a mixed-use concentration of retail, entertainment, arts, housing, and services to support job and economic growth"?
Sure.
Support singular.
Correct.
Any other comments? I've got, I didn't address the jobs housing balance of large residential projects that was in here of creating 100 or more units. But it is important because, as Peter said, in the
Which item number are you reading?
I'm reading old LU 4.6. Because
Maybe the 100-unit threshold is too low. I think that it is
Well, I guess-
worthwhile information to have at some point in time for the county to look at as we are reviewing projects and as time goes on, how are we doing? How much residential development has occurred? How is that related to, business, commercial development, job creation? Are we just exporting all of our jobs to surrounding counties, or are we, how's it working? I agree with you that, okay, so we have the information, what do we do about it?
That's what I was
Unless we were to say, well, we're not going to allow
Unless you
more
bring some
resi-
jobs with you.
Yeah, is that, and I'm not sure how you would go about doing that.
Because other communities
But-
have done such things.
Yes.
Yeah.
With
Doesn't
that-
sound like the direction we want to go, but, and I don't know if, at what point we say, it's, whose responsibility is it to take a look at this information?
Yeah, because that was one of the, when we're looking at Fonz and then seeing that one. I mean, are you saying you're going to use this information against somebody from putting that housing in because they're going to be bedroom commuters and there isn't the jobs here to support the housing, so now there's no project for it? Because typically, if you bring the people, then the infrastructure builds up around it, and how would you use that information? And requiring it, who's going to do that report? Are you going to put that restriction on the developer?
I think what Peter's saying too is that, houses are, they're a drain on the county's resources. They, your the police and fire and and also county health services, et cetera. People in the labor force, people that are making wages and buying stuff, they're, income generators. So the importance of the balance is that if all you're providing is housing for workers that are working someplace else and spending their wages in other communities, and that we're providing all of the services, but we're not getting into the benefit of the revenue, especially even from the businesses that they work for. So it's important to have an understanding of that balance. Again, I'm not so sure about, the number or the, certainly ask questions about the application, about who would actually be doing the analysis.
I don't like that at all. I think it's very discriminatory. I think that entire statement is discriminatory. I don't like it at all. I'm sorry.
One of the things I like about Fawn's edit is that it's not there anymore.
That's what I'd like
Okay,
too.
now, but the economics of a person living here and working elsewhere, the effect on us is only if they also shop elsewhere. The fact that they have a salary that comes from Stockton, let's say, doesn't affect us. We don't have a county income tax.
Well, they're paying housing taxes, they're paying school taxes,
No.
they're not putting a burden on our school
Correct.
systems. I mean,
So
there's a
when you-
whole lot tied into that.
So when Fawn, you say that that housing is a drain on the community, no, I don't think so.
Yeah.
I think it actually spreads the cost of providing services to a greater number of people. And the incremental cost of providing services, it doesn't go up by the same ratio.
Let me just put it into a simple equation, is that growing a healthy economy requires growing your jobs faster than your population. That's just basically it.
We better shut down now.
Well, we are in trouble, I will say that. But basically, it's that simple.
Well, then basically what we're telling our retirement community is go away, because they're not working and they are the bulk of our
Well,
communities.
and that's why it's so important to have a young, talented workforce, which is something that we don't
Well,
have.
we don't have a college to educate them
No.
with. We don't have any of that infrastructure, and
So by adding more housing and more population, you're just exacerbating the problem, so.
I don't
Or the
believe we
challenge.
are. I
No,
mean,
that's-
I don't believe we
Well,
are.
I know you guys don't believe it. So let's skip the philosophical differences about, what we think economic development is, because we have people out here that are wanting to talk, and we need to move forward, and we could spend probably a lot of time on this. And, I left it out. I don't know how you're probably leaving it out.
I like 4.9.
Good.
It kind of covers the bases for me in leaving 4.6 out.
Just one question on 4.6 quickly. Even if this is not in the general plan, is there anything to prevent the Board of Supervisors from creating such a requirement?
Now,
Where are you?
Old 4.6 that we
Oh,
were just
old
on.
4.6.
did you mean requiring it or just conducting analysis for the FYI purposes?
Either way.
We probably couldn't require it as a condition of an application, for example.
Right.
But the county certainly could do such a study.
Well, but the board could require it by ordinance, couldn't it? Whether this is in the general plan or not.
At some future point, you're saying?
Yeah. In other words, not everything needs to be in the general plan to get stuck in an ordinance.
Well, this is true.
I would hope that it
If
would
it's in
never
the
be an
general, if
ordinance,
it's in
but
the general plan, then it needs to be part of an ordinance or some type of measure that implements it. But if it's not in the general plan and the board felt it was necessary, unless it was inconsistent with the general plan. So with all these policies and our concern about making sure we have enough jobs, if the board felt that, some project was coming forward, there were, 1,500 new homes and no area of commercial with that development, they might say, we're concerned about that and we want to see what this does. And they could probably require that.
But that falls under a different category, does it not, of requirement, and that is the specific plan? Specific plan requirements require that kind of work on multiple
With a specific
components.
plan, typically there is an economic component of the analysis that's done.
Is it an economic component, or is it a balancing component? You've
It's a
got lots
financial
of homes
component.
and you don't have any commercial, come on, you need some commercial, or there's no place for people, there's no park, there's no something.
When the county reviews and approves a specific plan, it doesn't have to have all those components, but you need to look at all that and say, this still works for us. And usually it's a longer-term project, a larger project that says, okay, here's how we're going to finance these improvements. There's typically a public services, facilities and financing plan. that goes along with a specific plan, so that you look at all those various components. There isn't a requirement that there be a certain amount of commercial involved in it,
Of course not.
but there could be.
Right. If the development, for example, was adjacent or very proximate to a large commercial development, those people are using those facilities, they don't need their own.
Right.
They don't need a new one. Understand?
Don't you think our county has some responsibility in doing these analyses themselves and keeping a pulse on our county and growth? I mean, obviously, I can just open my eyes and look and see where we're at. We don't need a study for it, but instead of putting everything on top of developers, why isn't our county doing a study and an analysis, and then using that when we're going over our general plan? And if we're going to be doing amendments, saying, hey, the county had a study done, this is where we're at, should we be looking at a general plan amendment at this point? Why does everything have to go on a developer? And a developer doing 100 is only going to isolate a study to a very small area? We should be looking at our county as a whole when we're doing this and not a tiny project. I mean, to me, it seems like our county has some responsibility in doing these studies and looking at them overall.
Okay.
Is that a
Wow, no
rhetorical
one's
question?
even
Was that a
come up
rhetorical
with it.
question, or was it
Yeah.
specific, you want me to
Right.
answer that?
No, I agree completely with Lisa that the county should be tracking, what's our unemployment rate? What's our underemployment rate? What's our, people at various kind of skill levels? So
think
that
we
people
have
on the
a-
outside can say, hey, there's a lot of unemployed people in Calaveras County. That's a good place to go.
Not if they
locate a
don't,
business
not if
because-
they don't have any skills.
So if you wanted to take
Well, there's not every job, not every employer needs high skills. Okay, I'm just saying, if they've got a business that doesn't require high skills, but they want an ample supply of people, they would look at those numbers. If they're going to plop in a software engineering firm, then they need software engineers.
I think there is an economic development company here in,
there is.
that's.
Commission.
Yeah, that does that kind of,
So why?
that has that kind of data, I believe.
It's
Yeah.
readily available.
Yeah.
For that, you don't need a new study.
Yeah.
So why don't we change this out instead of putting it in this type of effect, is saying that we're encouraging our own county to take a look at our economic development and residential and whether or not our general plan amendment needs some tweaking at some point in time. I mean, you
Or
can't just
maybe-
look at one little project with 100 houses and decide what's right for the whole county right there, but that just doesn't even work in my head.
I think you're swinging after the bell. If we adopt Fonz, it's gone.
Yes. And if that's gone, Peter, is there a portion of that that's going to cause us a problem later?
No.
Okay,
The county can obviously conduct any study it thinks it needs to have,
good.
and we should be looking at these numbers regularly.
And perhaps if there's a slurry of residential projects over
Or a
100.
slurry of commercial businesses open and we need
Yeah.
more housing.
Yeah, or something, you know.
Oh,
you
yeah.
could
That's
trigger
going to
that,
happen real
It
soon.
could.
So are we've got, should we open it to the public?
Yes.
Yeah? All right, so I would invite someone to come to the podium and talk about economic development and economics and land use, and hopefully, I think copies of the proposed goal and policies were distributed, and let me just note the changes. One was land use, the goal to strengthen and diversify our economic base through the creation, retention, expansion, and attraction of business, agriculture, and industry. And the other change was on 4.6, which is just to strike, create a strong sense of place. And we'll probably review those again, but,
And 4.3.
4.2.
oh, yes,
4.2
oh, that's
adds
right.
old 4.1.
Right, 4.2 adds old 4.1, and I think with that.
And 4.3 changes suitable to compatible.
Oh, yes, thank you. All of those other ones.
Did you get the change to 4.6?
Yes.
Yes,
yours?
yes.
Okay.
So with that, would anyone like to talk about economics and land use?
Marty Crane, yes, there is an economic development company, and we have been talking from day one about, and trying to gather data to do an inventory of what is in our county. So, and working closely with Tuolumne County as well. So, partners, it's all about partners. County doesn't have to do everything, we can partner. And on number 2 in the old one, I guess this is called the old one, right?
Say again?
On
Number 2 in the old one.
It mentions allow residents to engage in a broad range of home-based occupations compatible with neighborhood character. Is that still in there?
Yes, it's now new 4.3, encourage entrepreneurship and home-based business
Oh,
development.
Sorry,
Yeah.
couldn't find it.
It's all right.
Didn't see
Compatible with
it, back and
neighborhood.
forth. And then just, there, I'm sure there's a lot, but other people. There, I had on the LU4G, the second sentence, it says, seek relationships with community and professional groups to evaluate planning needs of the county and address constraints to economic development. It immediately says after that, amend the general plan. I'm wondering if we shouldn't maybe say, consider amending the general plan and applicable ordinances where such needs and constraints are identified. Just because there's a.
Marty, I think I got a couple people up here that don't know where you are.
Oh, on the last, on the back.
LU4G, on
the back of the-
implementation.
On this one, I'm sorry.
In the back, way in the back.
The very last thing on the back of this.
Page
I haven't got there yet.
It's on LU 26, page LU 26.
We haven't gotten to those programs
No, and
yet.
so maybe we'll make a note of that, and when we get to it, we'll include it.
Oh.
Yeah, that's fine.
Well,
No,
you
they
talked
go
about it-
together.
You talked about it. up
Sure.
It
front.
came up
Sure.
in context.
Yeah, but I made a note of it. We'll bring it.
Thank you.
We'll keep it.
I'm going to
Yeah.
have to go, so
Sure.
thank you.
Dave Haley representing Castle and Cook. As a developer of the larger projects, we don't look to balance within our own projects. We look to do specific plans, and sometimes they're 100% residential, and look to the other areas within a community that are commercial. So we look at a mixed use and available commercial versus residential within a community-wide context, and sometimes we even reach out beyond that, whether it's Angels Camp to Copper or whatever. So to do a proper analysis, that's why we do a specific plan. And sometimes it's mixed use, sometimes it's not. Example, Saddle Creek is only residential plus golf course. Or, Sawmill Lake has two hotels with residential because of the town square. Or Copper Valley Ranch has a lake club with no golf course, but 80% residential. And then we look at Copper Cove, which is an area at Low Burns Ferry Road, which is a lot of commercial opportunity with not much residential. So it's a community-wide thing. It's not just a project of 100 units or more looking to balance within itself.
So when, as a developer that was looking at developing in a community or an area, do you do a formal study of some sort that you would share with the county at any point in time?
We do in-house studies, yes.
And if something like that was put into our general plan, do you think the developers would be willing to share that information?
We have a hard time matching the regulatory process of matching into a county requirement. As a business, we do our own, yes. But to say we have to get an acceptance of that study by a government, that's a difficult
And
thing.
if you did your study and it wasn't even feasible to build there, obviously you wouldn't.
Obviously, we wouldn't, but that's our
Okay.
choice.
All right,
And
cool.
sometimes it catches up with itself
Sure.
over time in the marketplace.
Mr. Haley, with Sawmill as an example that you just mentioned, there are two hotels,
Proposed hotels.
two proposed hotels, and there are different types of hotels. One's a resort and one's more of a modestly priced one, am I right?
Correct.
Okay, and there's no commercial, as I recall.
No, because that's on the town square.
That's on Town Square and the existing commercial center over there with the IGA market and the hardware store and all that.
Yes, because that center is more in the middle of town, so the more the retail portion, like grocery store, hardware store
Right,
is there.
common use, bank and whatnot.
Correct.
Okay, so you look at the whole area, as you say, and you say, well, we don't need a grocery store because there's one there. We don't need a hardware store because there's one there. We don't need specialty shops because that's part of the town square. However, there is a shortage of hotel rooms anywhere around, so this would be a good place for hotels? Is that how that happens?
Correct. It's a more regional wide, better location, has better amenities, and we can do a better job.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm glad somebody look at things in a practical manner, not an emotional basis. Boils down to supply and demand. Now, please forgive me because I know the product requires you to have whatever you see, public has to be seen.
Oh, it was up there, they must have just ran
Fawn
out.
referred to it, but it may have been on the outside table.
No, I only find it, I'm not complaining, okay?
They have it back there, I've got an extra one.
Right in front, right?
This one, right?
Yep.
I want the book that you're looking back, what the old one, what you're gonna have a new one. Fine.
You're not the only one confused.
What?
It's easy for me to be confused,
No,
okay?
no, there's
not
no
confusing.
old and no new. We are working off of the general plan that was given to the public, that's what we're calling the old.
Do you have
Only
a
be,
copy here right now, I can look
well, you should have your own copy if you're gonna attend the meetings.
at? Baby.
It's
I'm a-
public.
Hey, if I'm a.
It's a
I'm
public
not-
document.
Anyway, I don't want to take up my 5 minutes, okay?
Good
But
idea.
whatever you see, I was able to see it here, okay? But you do have those yearly or so, Brown Act, how you comply with it. So I'm sure you're going to come up to date. So it's a question you already answered. I'd like to maybe repeat it again. One of the things that strikes me right off the bat, what I see is 4.7, and you might change it already, it says provide business-friendly environment with clear and efficient planning, permitting, building guidelines and regulation. That's wonderful. How about just saying provide a friendly environment with clear, efficient planning and et cetera?
I think,
If I can address, because in this particular section of the land use element, the economics and land use, the mention of the business component of that is a little more important, and the notion is that we need to specifically address a business in this. And I
Well,
believe,
I thought
I mean, Lisa wrote it, I don't want to put words in her mouth, but, and then I.
business, okay, for construction and stuff is business, okay? But if somebody wants to come in there, build a house, okay, economically affecting the county, but unless you have a friendly environment for a person who wants to do business at a home or whatever, it would deserve the same courtesy as a business does, because then it's a property tax, sales tax, and et cetera. That's my point, that's what I'm trying to say.
I agree it's the same courtesy, but the emphasis here is on economics and economic development, and therefore, that's why the reference to business.
But-
Let's agree that we disagree on it, okay?
But let me add some comfort to your issue. In the context of discussing that, we were discussing the implementation measure that Marty referenced earlier, right? And it's LU4G.
You see the 4G I don't have. I
Okay,
got-
that's okay, I'm going to summarize
Okay,
it
thank
for
you.
you. And it was, and you heard from me a discussion about taking a look at our policies and our procedures with respect to planning, building department, public works and whatnot, to see whether or not if they're too cumbersome, to use one word, okay? So looking at those policies from government in general would benefit the individual person who had just wanted to build a house.
Fantastic. Okay, thank you very much. Okay. Also, because it says the biggest business in this county is this right here. Highest employer for economic, Calaveras County, building and et cetera. They are the biggest employers, high expense, and they have the comfort of what do you call it, cost of living adjustment. So this is not the place to get into it, but another thing that I really appreciate that when you have like Murphy's, whatever, historical section, but because I'm not Valley Spring, let's get that clear, I'm from Rancho and Jenny Lind. Jenny Lind's been quite a historic over there. That's existed for a long time. And they're just getting pushed aside, okay? And it's very close, if not next to, Rancho. That's, and as a matter of fact, Jenny Lind and Rancho, for instance, it's a lot closer to downtown Stockton than downtown Valley Spring. I mean, as far as Jackson goes. There's so much potential, commercial potential, on Highway 26. If you want to get a reality check, take a look at the traffic that comes and goes back and forth, east to west, along Highway 26.
Are you saying that the Jenny Lind community should be designated as a,
Historical.
have its own community design?
That's right, folks. That is not part of Valley Spring as we understand it.
Okay. When would that be an appropriate time and
address it.
place to bring up that subject?
When we look at the map.
When we look at the map? Okay.
Because that has some historical value. I think it's one of the older establishments in this county.
Okay. Is the map at the end of the process, Mr. Morrow?
That was my intent, but it's really up to, if you as a commission want to bring it forward, maybe at the end of, I think that the policies will direct where
Right.
we go with the map.
Okay.
And I think all of the policies throughout the whole thing will then sort of lead us to, here's where the rubber hits the road, where the map's on, the land use designation on the ground, what's this really mean as far as how these policies are affected, so.
So the people of Jenny Lind, if they want to affect this change, they should kind of get their
Motor running.
yeah,
Thank
so
you.
that when the map comes, you can come before us and say, we think that we ought to carve out this little area, and it ought to have some mixed use, and it ought to have da-da-da-da-da, and then it can be
Just
considered.
the
But-
potential actually be used whenever it becomes.
Yeah, but that's a bit of homework to do, so now
Well,
it's
I
not too late to
I
start.
agree with you.
Yeah.
I'm
Well,
not on the planning
and
commission.
that's what, the invitation was out, or has been out for, months to do just that. But again, it's not too late for Jenny Lind people, property owners, to make that request.
Oh, we're trying to work with LAFCO and so on. And
I don't think LAFCO has anything to do with it. Not with this, if you're looking for,
Well, as far as getting identity, individual identity for Rancho and Jenny Lind.
LAFCO? Okay, maybe
Yes,
I may be
yes,
wrong,
yes.
sure.
But there's a lot of other issues here that you don't want to be upset about. Another thing is local employment. We love it. How about getting all these, nothing against you, sir, all these experts coming out of all the other counties to help us out? Did you ever look at it, how much we spend? Are you that disrespectful for your constituents, a bunch of idiots? That we have to have all these stakeholders and experts coming in from all the different counties and areas to help us out, to tell us what we want. I don't know if it's Caltrans or all the other different specialists. If you add up together, let's get local people, the one who get...
4.9,
Which one?
4.9.
And Mr. Race, you've got about a minute left. And I have given
No,
you extra minutes. Okay,
I
just because we've had a lot of back and
I
forth.
just like to finish this,
Sure.
and if whatever I don't finish, I'll make it public on social networking. Don't worry.
Oh, sure.
Local employment. Better take a look at it. Who we hired, what we hired, where we hired it for. This county had a long policy discourage business by all the consent and suggestion from folks not from this county. And people do realize it. This is basically almost like a retired community. Ones who escaped from the Bay Area, like me. And so, those are my suggestions. I will
Thank
get
you.
into more detail as time comes.
Thank you
you
very
very
much.
much, ma'am. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
I do have to go, but there was one thing I just wanted to add. In that LUG, whatever.
4G.
4G, thank you. When I read that, I didn't take that to mean we were only going to be looking at these needs and constraints to see what was in a negative, like that we needed to loosen up or anything. I was also thinking that we would be looking at the needs of the county. Are these policies and everything, are they creating an efficient working model or tool for the county so that the county can be efficient in their planning and the work that they do? So yes, if there are needless constraints or whatever unnecessary constraints, yes, but on the other hand, the county's got to be efficient, and this is the tool that they use.
Okay.
So I was looking at it, I was reading it to be both ways, just evaluate it and see where if things need to be adjusted, that's all.
Thank you.
I can speak again.
No, thank you,
She
Mr. Reese.
spoke again.
She did? She already
Second
spoke?
time.
Yes.
All right, well then, come on up.
No. That's straight. Let
Oh,
the
okay.
lady-
Yeah, I didn't realize
let
it.
her speak again. Oh, yeah.
But you can.
I'm gonna kill that.
Oh, go ahead.
You're okay.
You're good. Go ahead.
Okay, sorry. I just wanted to talk about the old 4.6. a little
Okay.
bit. That discussion about.
Jobs, housing, all
Yeah,
right?
jobs, housing, just, okay, so the way it read, or reads, or whatever you want to say, require new residential projects, creating 100 more jobs. Again, I'm wondering why we're doing just residential. It seems it could be all development projects, require development projects, X out the 100 or more units, because that's an arbitrary number anyway. To provide an analysis of jobs, housing balance, just because a lot of developments are mixed developments, they're residential and commercial, so, and a lot of the information that we use to judge whether it's a good or bad project is based on that. It's mixed residential, commercial, and it's supposed to be providing a jobs, housing balance, so that seems like that would be very good information to know. My second point is that you're not putting you're requiring an analysis to be done, but you're not saying it needs to meet any requirement. You're just saying we need this information. It would be good to have to help us understand what this is doing. We've had many developments, commercial, industrial, residential, mixed, you name it, come forward, and someone will claim lots of things, but there's no data. So they'll say, okay, we're providing 150 units, and this is going to provide X amount of construction jobs, which will mean those people will do X amount of increased shopping jobs, and then we'll have more jobs at the gas station, and then, so we have all these kind of endless claims about stuff that's really hard for commissioners and the board to sort out what the reality is. So I don't know who's supposed to do this, but it would be good data to have us help understand projects coming through, whether they're residential or commercial or mixed or whatever. We understand there are houses that create jobs, but there's also costs to the county. So it would be a good analysis to be able to make to inform your judgment on projects. It's not that you're saying this standard has to be met or anything. You're just saying the information would be good to have to inform your judgment on the cost benefits of a project, whether you've got, so many jobs provided versus the costs for services and this sort of thing. So whether you have it as a policy, or maybe you could have it as an implementation measure to one of your economic policies to help implement one of those policies, maybe it could go in there. Anyway, I just like the idea of that information. As you say, the developers often do that themselves. We've had projects come before. They've already done these studies themselves. They cite the studies. Sometimes they're required, sometimes they're not. It would be nice if they were required, just so everybody would have the same information and there would be some real data.
Thank you.
Okay.
Muriel Zeller, Valley Springs. I wanted to remind the commission that it has been well documented numerous times that rural residential development does not pay for itself. Most notably, it was done by the American Farmland Trust in their cost of community services studies. that they did in various counties throughout the American West. Their studies conducted over the last 20 years show working lands generate more public revenues than they receive back in public services. Their impact on community coffers is similar to that of other commercial and industrial land uses. On average, because residential land uses do not cover their costs, they must be subsidized by other community land uses. Converting agricultural land to residential land use should not be seen as a way to balance local budgets.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, may I ask a question? On your attachment that you, for the letter you read earlier today, you said the attachment that, and there's a fact sheet associated with that, but that wasn't attached. Could you provide that information?
I apologize, and I meant to mention it when I handed that out. I ran out of paper this morning. So I will email the attachments to you. They're also readily available on the internet, but I will email them to everyone.
Thank you.
Holly Mines. I guess this old LU 4.6 seems to be drawing most attention from some of us in the audience. I agree with Colleen that we do need to have this kind of data. And I do remember, again, I keep harping back to the housing element because it's something I've always been interested in, and I followed it, and I listened to the discussion that you had before. And there were a number of different how should I say, suggestions of what, the planning department should be doing, in assessing the need for housing and the balance of housing and all of that kind of thing. And it seems to me, I remember hearing Peter say a number of times, all that's well and good, but the planning department simply does not have the resources, the time, or the staff to be conducting these studies at this time. So if we do need to gather that data, I don't think we can really count on the planning department to do it, and I'm not sure what other departments in the county. We seem to always be strapped, we seem to always be understaffed, and not be able to complete, sort of these peripheral kinds of tasks that really should be done in all counties to keep abreast of what the economic conditions are. So it seems to me, as Colleen pointed out, that when people are going to engage in a big project, they're going to be doing a lot of that stuff anyway. And so if we could provide them with some kind of a sheet or a format in which we ask them, to justify their, their calculations on what kind of housing and how much and how large. It seems like, I know that Castle and Cook has done it before because they did it when I was on the Planning Commission, so I don't think it's totally unreasonable to ask. The other thing is that again, I'm quoting Mr. Tuno, and I apologize in advance if I misquote you, but it seemed to me that you said, what difference does it make to us if somebody from our county drives down to Stockton to work, as long as they bring the money back and spend it here? Well, my response, there's two responses that I have to that. One is that if you go down to Stockton and you work in Stockton, you're likely to do your shopping down there when, at your lunchtime or right afterward, so you don't have to stop on the way home. So when you send people out of the county, you are sending money out of the county. I just don't think you can deny that at all. The second point related to that topic is that, in my view, a healthy community keeps its people within its community, particularly when we're talking about young. We're trying to attract more young families. We're trying to have a range of community members. I don't think we all only want to have old people in our community. We want to have young people. We want to have children. We want to have a spread, and we want to keep those people in the community and bring their children up and hope to develop an economic environment where their children can return and work. So I think we really do need to take this issue of kind of the jobs and housing balance really seriously. And since you want to return to speak about the housing element soon and change it, that might be something that you might want to consider in the housing element. I mean, I think it belongs there as well as it belongs in the economic discussion in the land use. But I really think it's a topic that we have to continue to concentrate on and think, you know, in what ways can we bring families here and then retain them once they're here? And also for the sake of children, if their parents have to go to Stockton to work, that means they're not home with their children. And that means they need more childcare. It means there's more opportunity for them to go wayward, you know, because there's nobody there to supervise them. So I see that as a really important issue. But I do want to say that I appreciate the work that you did, Fawn, on this list that you presented today. And I certainly don't have any criticisms or corrections to make of that. Thank you.
I would add that I accept your apology because that is not what I said. I said the effect of their having a job in Stockton, for example, is not the problem. The problem is that to the extent they also shop there. You understand?
Yeah, okay, well, then that's a problem, isn't it? I mean, and it's a problem, you don't think it's a problem that they have to go and they have to leave early, go down, work for 8 hours, then come home, and they are not in the county, and they're not with their families? That's not a problem?
It's none of my business what their lifestyle is.
But that's not a chosen lifestyle. If you can't find a job here, you have to go to Stockton.
People are
we could-
choosing it all the time.
We could go on this conversation for a while. Thank you, Holly. Anyone else?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I know.
So I think she took about 3 minutes. Is 3 minutes good for you?
Lady, I timed those folks also. Okay,
So
got
did
time.
I. No, this is the second ups. I think
Yes, I know,
she
just
took
like
about 3
everybody else
minutes.
before me just now.
Those are all singles. First time up. You're the
No,
second
no,
time
no,
up.
no, 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 no,
On
no.
this
Take a
one.
look at
On
the
this topic. All right, so just go ahead. Let's not talk about time. We're burning it.
No, not really. You're burning my time. Anyway, there's certain document that's being presented and not considered. A, B, and C, the people voted for D. I like it because we have a witness here who was there. The other thing is that as far as, getting information, well, publication in this county is not exactly up to date. Some of those publications or recent laws and et cetera, what's happening in the rest of the state. Today came out, hey, California has less unemployed because there's so many people got new jobs. The very last paragraph said, it's all public works as for the government, okay? Is that an asset or is that a liability when you work for the government, folks? The biggest employer in this county is your government. The biggest asset, biggest liability in this county is your government. So please consider that also. We want education? Yes, definitely. And that's what we're going to have free college, right? Get real, folks. So please, there's more to this world than Calaveras County. Right now, we're a very good living providers for a lot of people from outside of the county. And they shop outside the county also. I love the experts. They're nice people. But I think there's enough people here to know what quality of life they want. And I don't know if it's Caltrans, with Harnish, or any other carpetbaggers that come and go through this county. You underestimate the intelligence and the quality of those people, the ones who retired. We have here a gentleman in my neighborhood who was worked for the Rand Company, who designed the original, what do you call it, that's Delphi technique and meetings. It doesn't take a genius to recognize it and how it's being applied. So, thank you. Did I go over time? Is it going to cost me time and a half?
I'm going to see if there's anyone next, though. Anyone else? Thank you. Anyone else? I think, okay. I think you're the last one.
Okay, I'm Tanya Dotson from Valley Springs.
Did you
And-
sign in, Tanya?
No, I didn't. And
But you will?
She wants to.
So anyway,
Didn't know it was a controversial question. Okay.
anyhow, so I'm just a little concerned about the term historic, designating things historic. I've been out of the general plan loop for a while, so I don't know if things have changed. But from what I had read in the past, designating things historic puts a burden on people to meet certain qualifications and certain standards. I don't know if that's just at the state level or if that's going to trickle down to the county level as things, we're talking about Moke Hill designated historical mixed use, and Peter was talking about Jenny Lind being designated historical. But from what I understand, that comes with burdens on the people who live there. And I don't know if that's still the case or not, but if so, it might be something to consider. So.
By identifying the community as a historic community would not impose any state or federal standard on individual property owners. The county could adopt a program to identify historic sites and buildings, in which case certain standards would apply, but that doesn't mandate that we do so.
Could that open a foothold for the state, though? Could that start
I don't believe so.
open a door?
I don't believe so.
In the context of the discussion, we're talking about Moke Hill and we're talking about the community center there, which is historic, whether each individual building has been so designated as either a local landmark or a state landmark. It didn't matter to the purpose of the discussion.
Right.
It just mattered that there was an area, and then we were talking about it in the context of appropriate mixed-use development. So we weren't really crossing into the state historic landmark issues. We're going there.
I'm not talking about the landmark, though, but just, it was my understanding that designating something historic.
Same thing,
an
that's what I meant.
historic area,
Yeah, a landmark, a historic landmark. It could be a building.
or just even an area, was my understanding. I could be wrong.
I don't know the state that does areas. I think it does
Okay.
building by building.
The state you can adopt a historic district that specifically restricts. Downtown Sonora, for example, has adopted an historic district that has very strict standards on what you can and can't do with buildings within the historic district. Many historic communities have done that. That has been a choice of that community to do so. And I think that would, be a choice that this community could do if it felt it was appropriate. But by identifying an historic community designation does not mandate that or doesn't impose any additional standards or restrictions at that level.
And just be careful, it's not a step down that path, or that was my main concern of what direction it's heading, and, for just to protect the people. And
Some
so.
communities have it to protect the people and to protect the asset.
So,
Yeah,
as long as it's individual's choice.
that's right.
So
Yeah.
that's the thing, if that's what they choose for themselves, as long as they're not choosing it for other people.
That's good. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, back to the commission.
Can I offer one suggestion just for consistency of
Yes,
language?
please.
Under the goal, the way that I have worded the various goals is more like sort of an object. This is what we're shooting for.
So just
And
strengthen?
so I would just say, a strong and diversified economic base.
Sure.
That first phrase.
Yeah. Through the creation, retention, expansion?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Oh,
fine.
I see what you're.
Yeah, so sure, I'm good with
Okay.
that.
I have no problems. The rest of the policies as suggested and as discussed makes sense. As far as the old 4.6, as I said before, that was something that sort of had evolved from my predecessors. I didn't see it as being good or bad. It was just there. I said, well, I'm not going to mess with something that was already there. If you want to remove it, I think that there are plenty of opportunities for the county to do its own analysis. Funding obviously is a concern. We're making ends meet. We've had to cut budgets over past years, and we don't have a lot of extra money for those kinds of studies. but, it's something that the county felt was necessary, and we will, I will continue to advocate in my budget for continuing planning studies as we move forward, with implementing the plan over time to see how we're doing.
Well, and
So-
it is an appropriate topic for the economic development company or corporation to take on. I'm sure they would find that very
And there may be-
eye-opening.
Yeah, and there may be, other entities or organizations that
Have a similar
funding
interest.
resources
Sure.
that could do that. So
Sure.
to mandate it to be done, I don't think it's, an analysis of the project really is sort of meaningless. I would look back at the language there, and, 100-unit project analysis of that doesn't, address the whole picture, as Mr. Haley pointed out. You've got to look at the context of where it's located and all the surrounding uses and the larger community. I think that if at some point in time there's going to be a scale of project, that we would want to have that information, and whether it comes from the applicant or the county somehow acquires that information elsewhere, it would be valuable information to have. I'm just not sure what kind of language that we would want to put in the general plan to, how do we state that? And maybe it comes out of an implementation measure that, the county periodically reviews its jobs, housing balance, and other economic, I'm just thinking of language off the top of my head right now, other economic indicators to identify a healthy economy or something along those lines. So we look at that information periodically. So if it seemed to be their consensus that including that original language was not desired, and so I just want to let you guys know that I think we don't need it as a policy. It's valuable information. I think there's going to be a time we will want to have that information, but to mandate it as a component of a project submittal may not be the most appropriate thing. So,
I like your language of periodically reviewing it, because I think it is good data.
yeah. So I think we can add that as an implementation program when we get to that at the end of this process.
Would that be a function, an appropriate function of the Economic Development Commission? I mean, that's at least an ad hoc kind of
It
body.
could be, they have their own agenda, their own mission, and whether or not it fits in with that, I don't know. They've also got limited resources. They're a volunteer organization essentially. I don't know if anyone's paid to do
They are a
that.
corporation separate from, in no way connected with the county, however.
But they do, they may have connections or resources that would help the county, and they're, I'm sure, willing to share any information that they have. I've met with them several times, and they definitely want to help the county in its progress in economic development.
Yeah.
Okay, so we haven't moved from our previous position of adopting Fawn's edit with the changes that we already have delineated,
Right.
correct?
Right, that's where we're at.
Then
So is there a motion?
I'll make the motion.
I don't think we're making motions, just recommendations.
Oh, we're not, that's right.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, all right. So is there consensus?
There's consensus from this chair.
Yes.
There's consensus from me, but I would like to take Peter's recommendation also in looking at 4.6 when we go to implementation measures.
Okay, all
Okay.
right, let's do that. All right, so we have consensus.
Oh, and I think this is what you're saying. This jobs housing analysis phrase pops up a few other places, does it not, Mr. Maurer? Can you do a scan to look ahead, a word search, because I'm pretty sure it's in there more than once.
Ahead in other elements?
I-
There's not much more ahead in the land use.
Unless there was something in the implementation measures, I don't believe there is anything else that talks about jobs housing analysis.
Okay, my imagination, bad memory then.
There may have been some
You might have read it
discussion in the early
Nah.
parts about trying to
I was-
maintain a healthy job housing balance, but I don't think there's any other policy language that, none that I recall.
A jobs housing balance. How do you do a jobs housing balance without a jobs housing analysis? Yes, it's in there. Where is it in there? Is it this element?
It would be in this element if it's anywhere else.
I don't remember seeing that.
I don't think it is
Well, we'll
listed
find
anywhere
it when it
else.
comes there. I just want you to,
Okay.
don't want to have the
Because
same.
we are going to be reviewing the, from the get-go of this section at least,
Okay.
right? All of
Right.
the edits and all of that.
Yeah, I will
So we
bring
can-
back to you all the edits, and I
And
will
you
do
could
a
just
search.
do a word
for-
search, jobs, housing, yeah. Okay. All right, we're moving on. Regional planning and coordination. Any comments?
I, 5.1.
Oh, on the goal, I note that planning department picked up notes from me and added language that were consistent with my suggested edit. I still have a problem with the goal statement, a different new problem. I wouldn't like the notion that the interest groups that are included in there, and that was my edit that you picked up,
Okay.
I wouldn't like the language to suggest that the interest groups, how best to put this, have an equal place at the table. When we coordinate planning efforts with other agencies and interest groups, it could very well be that other agencies have a stronger place at the table than an interest group, self-appointed, self-identified interest group. So I'm all in favor of interest groups being at the table, but there comes a time when the people who need to vote on something vote on it, and those folks don't do that.
Right.
They don't have an equal voice. They have input, but they don't have an equal voice, to put it kind of harshly.
I don't think there's anything in this goal statement, which is a very broad goal statement, that indicates that if any one of these groups has some kind of veto power or equal, we want to coordinate with them, we want to take in everyone's input, but ultimately, you're right, the board makes a decision. And I don't know that it needs to be said. To me, it's obvious.
Okay.
We want to work with them, we want to make sure that every interest group, whether it's the Taxpayers Association, or the Planning Coalition, or the
Chamber of Commerce.
Chamber of Commerce, whatever interest groups
Right.
out there, we listen to them, we coordinate with them, and where we have, mutually beneficial goals, great. Where we can, leverage resources, wonderful.
Yeah.
But ultimately, the county makes a decision.
So for
I just
example-
I wanted to thank you for putting in the phrase, because I suggested it, but I didn't want to, it suggested that
Right.
that's a team effort.
Right, so a perfect example would be if the EDC were going to, develop a jobs housing balance, or they're going to do some analysis, and then we're interested in that too, so we might, they might need some GIS information or something, so we would coordinate with them to produce something like that.
On 5.1,
Well, I think Kelly were you about to say something, Kelly?
Well, I was going to say LU-5, if you look at what you're going to be coordinating to do, it's just to identify mutually beneficial goals, avoid duplicating efforts, and leverage limited resources. So I think the language as it now sits is fine.
Yeah, I do too. I think we're agreeing with that, yeah. Lisa?
I was just moving on to LU 5.1. if
I
no
think
one
we're
else-
ready.
Okay. I have a real issue with avoid conflicts. I think that that's very negative in tone, and we could find a way to say that in a positive tone.
Can we just leave it off?
It was a recommendation from some public comment.
Yeah.
Conflict.
Yeah, it
I mean,
just-
why can't we just get rid of it and just put period after county?
And promote a friendly working relationship.
Yeah, that would be fine.
Kumbaya.
I don't know
song
why
that
that
everyone knew.
bothers me so much, but it sounds like we're setting out to get into a conflict with somebody, and I don't want to do that.
Right. No,
Well, this came out of a public comment. This was added since the draft, because it shows it's underlined there.
Oh.
I don't know, I don't
Well, I
remember whose,
apologize to whoever's comment it is,
whose
but it has a
recommendation
very
that
negative
was.
tone
Right.
to it, and I don't like it.
That would be the person immediately to your right.
David? Did that? I don't apologize anymore. Can we take that out, please?
I don't have it in my notes that I added that
Well,
language.
that's good. Let's take it out. Then he doesn't have it in his notes. He's good with us.
I was fine
That's
with
not
it
my
out.
underline.
Right.
I don't,
Yeah, it is.
All right, so
these are my notes.
I think we're good with taking it out. What,
I
moving
just-
on?
It's just negative. I'm good on the
Oh,
rest.
I'm sorry, I meant the wrong thing. Yeah,
Yeah.
you're right. But, no.
We moved on.
We- I don't
That's
think,
also underlined.
I don't
didn't
think
write
it's
that.
needed.
Follow me? This whole thing is underlined. It doesn't, the fact that it's underlined is not the indicative factor.
So are there any other comments on this section?
On 5.1, isn't that the law that we do that?
Avoid conflict?
Support, participate in, we have to participate in LAFCO, we have to participate in yada, yada, yada.
The only thing we're taking off is and avoid conflict.
No, I understand, but I'm just saying, isn't this the whole thing? You're saying it's a policy, but it is, I mean.
Not really. I mean, there are some things we have to participate in, there are other things that are optional.
Oh.
An option, an example would be, we cooperate and coordinate with Alpine County on development on the Highway 4 corridor because of the effect of Bear Valley, which is in their county, but affects our infrastructure.
Right.
And so we have a cooperative working arrangement with Alpine County. When I was in El Dorado County, Kirkwood happened to sit in 3 counties. So we had a cooperative, JPA, Joint Powers Agreement, between Amador, El Dorado, and Alpine to work cooperatively to address common issues and concerns about Kirkwood development. So those kinds of things, that are optional. They say, yeah, we want to do that. That's important to us,
Okay.
so that we don't waste resources, we don't.
I just thought the state required us, you will have a rep in this, you will have a rep there, and you will do this and that. That's not always the case.
I'm not aware of any specific requirements from any state that we have to be representative in certain things. I think it's a good idea, and I mean, it's probably,
Then
to
I'm
the
done
county's
with
benefit that we
5.1.
do.
Cool.
All right, any other comments?
5.3's got a typo, the underlined
2?
part 5.3,
No, I know, but
coordinate
it's-
2 effective provision, the 2
That's what I'm
should
saying,
be
it's
the.
2, right? T-O?
It should be the.
Oh, City Manager
To
Campus River,
coordinate the effect, yeah.
right. I just crossed out the 2, but you're right, the. Anything else? Anybody in the public want to talk about regional planning coordination? Sure. No one? All right. Back to the commission. Are we in consensus about this section?
Recommend we take it forward with just the one correction.
The.
Please.
The?
Well, there's 2.
Well,
There's
and avoid
2. I want
conflict.
to take
Avoid
off
conflict.
and avoid the conflicts
Okay.
and the,
Change 2 to
Typo.
the.
Agreed.
All right. Yep. All right, we're good.
Okay.
Now, I have a question before we move on to, if the plan was to move on to implementation programs, is that we did a lot of editing and changes to the policies. Is it going to be hard to kind of track to see, since we don't all have the changes and we changed things around and we mixed and eliminated and added, how are we going to really be able to do this?
Well, maybe we carry that over and we do it next week.
I'd
Yeah.
like that, because then it'll be a really good reference chart for us to work
Right,
off
because
of.
I think now, I mean, we're going to be looking at these in isolation, basically. We aren't going to see how they relate or don't relate back to specific policies that we have changed.
Agree.
Okay. I think that's
Do you
great.
guys agree?
I agree.
You're saying we're directing planning to look at the existing programs to see if whether or not anything we've done up to this point.
No, I'm suggesting that we have our revised land use element in front of us prior to evaluating how the implementation programs.
Oh, just have a nice clean copy.
Yes,
we
because
made a lot of
we've made a lot of
changes
changes.
to Working with the element.
It's, otherwise, we're looking at,
I think it's a good idea.
okay.
Well, could we also have planning make changes they think are necessary?
That would be
to the
fine with us,
program?
too.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
certainly recommend changes that.
Right.
That is looking forward, looking at programs.
Looking at what we've done so far.
Yes, that's a good
And then
suggestion,
the last
yes.
part, because we're moving the community planning section, because we're going to go back to the community plan.
Right.
So the last component of the land use element is the implementation program.
Okay, and on that, because isn't the next meeting a pretty long meeting, or maybe not?
I don't know.
No.
But, okay, the ordinance that we were gonna work on, light and glare, adopt a dark sky ordinance, is that something that maybe some verbiage could be put together that we could play with a little bit, or are we not?
The actual language itself of the
Is
ordinance?
that what you were wanting to do here?
No,
Okay.
no, that would be something that we would
Yeah.
initiate after the general plan's adopted.
Got it.
The
Good.
idea is, we have a policy, we need an implementation
Okay.
program that supports it.
So we have a number of implementation measures or programs, whatever you want to call them, that implement the policies, but we've made lots of changes to the policies. So you need to go back and make sure, one, the cross-reference is appropriate, and do these still apply now that we've made modifications to the policies?
And as Kelly suggested, is based at, when you're going through making the revisions, is making changes to the implementation programs that would make sense
Yes.
prior to coming back to us as you're going through it.
When you look at the programs, and to see if whether or not there's something that stands out, needs to be changed based upon the work we've already done. If that section, the program section, could be provided to us in a Word format so that it includes the little notes, so that you can say, I changed this because of what we did over here. So that if you've crossed something out or you made some change, then we can see why.
Or maybe even use the strikeout and the underline, like you've been doing.
Well, the strikeout, that's fine, but it doesn't tell you why.
But I could annotate
Yeah.
the changes to show
If you
why.
annotate them, however you annotate them, fine, parenthetically, whatever. Even if you don't feel comfortable making a change, but you flag a piece saying, there's a problem with this based upon what you guys, the direction you guys have given me, and I don't know what to do with it.
Okay. I
All
can do
right.
that. So timing-wise then, I guess maybe,
We're done.
We're
Should we have
done.
public comment again? Is that on?
well, we should decide when we're going to continue this to.
Oh, okay.
So, next Thursday, the 29th, I have to be out of here at noon. We could spend the morning, and I could probably finish this up in the morning, but it doesn't give me a lot of time to make the changes, get it back to you, and time to read it, but, we've all been through it, so I could probably get it out by Monday, if that gives everyone enough time to review it by Thursday. Otherwise, then we have the first Thursday of November. We do have one item that we scheduled for that. That would be the review of formalizing the post-disaster recovery ordinance that the board adopted Tuesday as an urgency ordinance. An urgency ordinance is effective for 45 days, can be extended for a year and then up to 2 years. But we want to put this ordinance in place as a permanent provision so that in the event we have another disaster, we already have the provisions in place. And so to do that, we need to go through the formal adoption process, which means hearing before the Planning Commission, public notice, all that. So that's been scheduled for the 5th. So we're having a meeting on the 5th. I don't think that'll take that long.
I was going to say, what's your read on? Is there going to be a lot of?
The board has adopted it after, 2 days of hearings on it. And you could suggest make some recommendations as changes to it. I doubt the board's interested in a lot of changes, but there could be some minor tweaks on it that we could look at.
As far as public input, was it a lot of participation by the public during the board's
Yes.
deliberations?
Yes.
Okay.
We spent several hours reviewing it, discussing it.
We're talking about an ordinance that has now passed through the board.
As an
Only it's
urgency
an
ordinance.
Urgency for 45 days.
That expires if not adopted formally. So now we're beginning the formal adoption process. So this is an ordinance that allows for people back on their property, the reduction of some standards to facilitate the rehabilitation and recovery from the
And
disaster.
you want to include language, or you're going to include language that every time there is a disaster, this thing kicks back in.
Well, the way the language is written right now, it becomes effective whenever, it's written as a permanent ordinance. And so we need to now adopt it as a permanent ordinance, so that if we have another declared disaster, those provisions are already in place. But we need to go through the process of doing that.
And that the disaster sort of triggers its
The disaster,
re-upping.
yeah, it becomes effective once
Right.
it's a declared disaster. So that's something that we have scheduled for the 5th. Nothing else that I'm aware of we have scheduled, so if we felt you wanted a little more time, we could carry this over to the 5th and then not have a meeting next week.
What do you guys think? It's up to you.
I think I'd rather do that than come down here for 2 or 3 hours. Let's just do it all in one day. Plus, it gives you more time to make all those annotations that he's asking for.
Commissioners, other, at least as for,
Am I asking you to do anything?
I gave him more time to handle what your request was.
The annotation.
Kelly?
Lisa's suggestion is fine.
Yeah, all
Fine
right,
with me.
I'm good.
No
So,
meeting next week,
no meeting next week.
and
We
a 20-hour
continue
meeting the week after
the
that.
general plan to the 5th, along with the ordinance. And I think that's it. So,
I'm sorry, what's on the, what's
so the
on,
general plan,
Land use
discussion of
and
the land use
ordinance.
element was continued to.
Completion of it.
Completion of it,
And then
continued
the-
to the
And then
5th.
the emergency.
And the ordinance.
And that's it?
And that's
Yeah.
it.
fine.
all right, so
Wait
we,
a minute. What's the date on that one,
the
November?
5th.
November 5th, I believe, the first Thursday of the
Okay,
month.
fine.
Good. Do we have another public comment period?
If you can, I don't know if it's in your sphere of interest, but it would be nice if you can suggest to the Board of Supervisors this emergency reaction. We were not ready for the fire. I mean, that's obvious. Reacting, I don't care how much you care, it's how much you produce. There might be a little rain coming out of it. It's already affected LA down south. You know, I'm sure you are all up to date on the consequences. Somehow, if you can impress on the Board of Supervisors, be prepared for eventualities. Have something in place. Southern California, major problem, mudslide. We could be susceptible to mudslides. We're in a drought, but there was a little rain about a month ago near LA. Caltrans certified the bridge. Two or 3 days later, rain came, and the bridge got washed away. I mean, I'm sure you're all up to date on that stuff. But if we can impress on our elected officials, be prepared, have some kind of idea, about communications in this county. Eventually, there are a good chance of happening. If there's a heavy rain comes down, El Nino decided to come all the way up, not just stop in Arizona, all that forest land that's burned down, what kind of mudslides potential we have? Do we have anything in place? So, I don't know if you can do it or not, I don't know if it's in your dossier that you can, but somehow, you gotta, reacting is very expensive. Anticipation and preparation might help. And I haven't heard anybody say, let's get the first responders down here. What that they can recommend to make it healthier and safer living in this county. The guys who actually have to react right away. Not to have to wait till something happens after all this outside, very kindly, efficiently coming in and help us. But first responders, I don't care if it's the cops, the firefighters, whatever. First responders should have something to say because you are imposing certain potential, eventual, additional services, whatever you decide are going to be the buildings. Are they prepared? Do they have the funds? Where are they going to get it? they're gonna have to turn somebody to give their services that you think is the proper services. Have you heard anything from all those folks? I don't know if it's cops or the firefighters or whoever. They somehow drag them down here, because nobody been talking to those guys. I know it's very good intention, I respect it, and I believe it or not, I might give some people a hard time. I really appreciate what you folks going through. But sometimes, someplace along, somebody better plan on eventualities for reaction from the county. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
If I give you a hard time, it's only when you're up there. When you come down, you're a nice person.
Thank you. Mr. Haley?
Dave Haley again. I don't mean to overly comment on things, but I was thinking back there, as I was chairman of the Economic Development Company for a few years, and there was a desire by some to do regional coordination of planning. And I would caution you, that word coordination, it's informational, but every county and community has their own economic needs. And sometimes sharing information and the desire to get a certain business is not in the best interest of other communities. So coordinating is a difficult word. It's maybe sharing information at times, but we're not, regional governments of different jurisdictions with different economic bases and rules and needs is difficult to coordinate. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else? No? Okay. Close the public hearing portion, public comment. And Peter, you have something else?
Just a couple of quick report.
Okay.
I'm pleased to announce that we completed interviews and have 2 accepted job offers that are contingent for new planning staff. So we'll replace a vacancy created when Amy left a couple months ago, and a new position that the board authorized in my budget earlier in the year. So
Amy left?
Amy Ingertz left.
Oh, she did?
Yes, much to our dismay.
For a while.
She went to Spain?
No, much to my dismay.
Oh, I'm like, she went to
Yeah.
Spain?
We just
Lucky
trained her.
Amy.
We just trained her, and then she moved to Benicia.
Oh, yeah,
Oh,
Yeah.
oh, sorry to hear that.
Yes.
But, okay.
But we have
oh, little tiny Amy.
Yeah.
two new planners that are coming forward. Speaking of Amy Augustine, our contract planner, next week on the board's agenda, I will be asking for an increase in the compensation because we've run through her budget. And so some of the information that you requested on the background report, I need her help on, but some things took a little bit more than I anticipated. So fortunately, I had money in the budget for that as well. So we're going to be asking for attention to that. So once that's approved, then I can get her back on compiling some of that additional information that you guys had requested in the background report, and that should come back to you probably sometime in mid-November, early December. There won't be any meeting in at Thanksgiving time. So and then the 19th is going to be the asphalt plant hearing. We have not yet received the information from CB Asphalt, so it's a good thing we continued it further than what they requested.
Right.
But they had indicated that they should have that information to the environmental health officer for his analysis soon, with enough time to analyze it and provide a recommendation or an action on that. So
Still on the 18th,
still on the 19th
19th of November.
of November. So that'll be pretty much take up that day, I think. One other thing, let's see, what was I going to tell you? Gone, whatever it was. Anyway, thank you all for your hard work. And
Yes. We'll see you on the 5th. We are adjourned. To be continued.
meeting adjourned.
Did you memorize